Well, hello and welcome. Stacey Murphy here, and we are in the 10th and final episode of HCTV. This is all about beginning gardeners and common mistakes that beginning gardeners make and how to avoid them. And we're airing this I'm airing this. We are together because there's so many new growers this year. And I would love for you to shortcut the lessons learned from other growers and just jump right in and have a really great season. So that's why we're here. And question of the day is, what does playing the piano have to do with growing vegetables and herbs? So when I was a kid, I played the piano. Did anybody here take piano lessons? I'm curious. So I took piano lessons. I'm not sure. I don't think I ever asked for piano lessons. I don't know if my sister wanted piano lessons. It was one of those things that my parents knew would be enriching for us to learn how to play music. And so we would go once a week over to piano lessons at this woman's house. And we would sit in front of her piano and she would teach us. And the thing is as a kid, I was young. I was like 6 years old at the time, and my sister was 9 years old. And here I was learning how to play the piano, and I wanted to learn how to play songs I knew. And so I was sitting there always asking, I would sit down and she would give me these songs to play that I thought were just dumb. And I would say to her, can I play whatever song is on the radio? And she would say, in all due time, you'll be playing that music. And I was really anxious to play the music I wanted to play. And, what I found over the years was that I had friends who took piano lessons as well. And some of them were learning how to play individual songs. They were learning how to play songs. And the difference over the years was that I learned the theory behind playing the piano, and I learned what everything meant. And I learned basics. I learned patterning with my hands. I learned all the right techniques. And I really mastered playing the piano at a quick rate. And some of my other friends who were learning to play specific songs that they liked on the radio, they could play those songs, but they didn't know how to read music. And they didn't know how to create music. And they didn't know how to play with somebody next to them, like have somebody be playing a song and then just chime in and start playing with them. They didn't know how to do any of that. And so what I realized over time was that the exact lessons that I hated when I first started playing piano, which were the basics. It was like, really, I got to do the basics. I got to understand music theory. I got to read parts. I got to do the same techniques. I got to run my scales. I got to run my chords, all those things, all of the basics. That made me able to do so much more on a piano than my other friends who just learned a couple songs. That's all they ever learned was those couple songs. So what does this have to do with gardening? You might already have captured the lesson just by me sharing the story. So in the garden, I got a question today from somebody who said that they had a burning question, which was basically, what does it take to grow food for 2 people in a garden? How much space, how much time, how much energy? And this is a really common question. And, for me to grow that food, I can grow food for, 10 people without really trying, because I've got years and years of experience knowing the basics. And I know what's going to be successful, and I know what's not going to be successful wherever I live, and what's going to be easy. And I know what's going to take me the least amount of effort because I've learned the basics and I've been there and I walked that path. And so for you all that are here, I am going to answer that question. What does it take to grow food for 2 people? How much time, how much space? Let's talk about that. But I want to capture this lesson, which is that wherever you are on your journey, if you're brand new to gardening or if you have some years of experience, just know that you will get to a place where growing food is ritual, is habit, and it becomes easy. It may not be your first year. Probably won't be your first year. The first year you're going to run around not knowing what's going wrong with your chicken with your head cut off. Everything's going crazy. That's all normal. And you're going to try things, and some things are going to grow and some things are not going to grow. And so what it's about is, I would say that first year, just having a journal and journaling about what works and what doesn't, and keep going back to the basics. sun, soil, water, temperatures, fertility, which would be like compost, and nutrients. Those are the basics. And your time, how much time do you want to spend? Keep going back to those basics. Oh, I forgot plants. That's another basic, right? Plants and how to harvest them, how to care for them. So you keep going back to those basics and you keep looping. I have a loop where I have a learning curve. First step is looking at climate and temperatures. Second step, soil. Third step, looking at compost. Fourth step, looking at plants. Fifth step, looking at my time, my energy. How am I using that in the garden? My sixth step, my water systems. My seventh step, harvesting, because harvesting is about 40% of what you do in the garden. Harvesting and also maintenance, so caring for your plants, pruning and trellising. And last step is like specialty topics, like what else can I do in the garden that's not captured in those basics. And I just loop around in a circle, and I do a little bit each week on each one of those categories. And then that means that I learn a little bit about everything each and every week. Now, I want to go back to the original question. So I know you can be anxious. You're like, I just want to play that song, Stacy. Like for me, when I was playing piano, Chicago, this is going to date me back to the 80s, but Chicago was one of my favorite bands, and I wanted to play the song on the piano. That was the Chicago song. I also wanted to play that song from the TV show Cheers. And I wanted to play that, wouldn't it be nice if you could go somewhere where everybody knows your name? I wanted to play that song on the piano. And instead I was learning music theory, and I was practicing every week. And here's the funny thing is one time I went to a concert years later, and somebody was playing that song, Wouldn't It Be Nice If Everybody Knew Your Name, that song on the piano. And I was like, oh, I remember I wanted to learn how to play that song. And guess what? It took me like a day to learn it because I'd already learned all the basics and I already knew how to play. So it really is important to go to the basics. But I do want to cover this one question that I got about I'm watching a parasitic wasp that's right in front of me. It's really beautiful. I wanted to answer that question, the burning question that I just received from somebody. That was, what does it take to grow food for 2 people? So take a look at this garden around me, and I'm going to kind of go up with this camera a little bit so you guys can see behind me a little bit more. But basically what you see is I've got 4 or 5 garden beds, and then I've got a bunch of grow bags. And I'm in a house with 10 people. This is an intentional community. And with this garden, what we knew is if we tried to grow anything besides greens, greens and herbs, I would say, that we wouldn't be able to really grow as much food for everybody. The reason being that greens and herbs are the easiest things to grow. So if you're looking for the easiest, fastest way to get started, I always recommend greens and herbs. Easiest way. Now, when you have a small space, like I'm looking right here next to me, one of my garden beds, which is about 3 feet by 6 feet. I'm trying to remember the math on this. So when I think about how many servings of greens I eat in a day, so let me see if I can remember this math off the top of my head. So for every green plant that I have, kale, chard, collard green, those are the big ones, celery, sorrel, and then all my herbs. With those 4 greens that I mentioned, I harvest about 3 leaves from each plant weekly, and I harvest about 5 to 7 leaves, I would say, for each serving when I serve myself some sauteed greens or a salad. So that would be 5 leaves and each meal. And then I'm harvesting 3 leaves off of a plant each week. So let's just make the math easier and say that I harvest 6 leaves, just to make it round numbers. So let's say I do 6 leaves per meal. That would mean that I would need 42 leaves per week. And if you do the math and then see how many plants you need, 42 divided by 3, oh goodness, now math just got complicated. What's that number? It's somewhere in the like 15 plant range, maybe less than that, 14 or 13 plants. And so every plant that I have here, I have planted about 6 inches apart. And so if I have like 15 plants and they're spaced like 16 inches apart, it doesn't take much space to grow my greens. So then you can multiply that out to how many greens you're eating each week. Now that was me doing greens for every meal because I love greens. And so for you, it might be less. And then think about your other staple plants that you like to grow. Now, this is where it gets tricky, and where, remember, you sometimes as a beginner, you want everything. Like, you want to play a particular song on the piano the first time you play the piano, but it's complicated. And so let's say you want to grow all your tomatoes and all your eggplant and all your cucumber and all your zucchini and all your greens and all your herbs and all your onions and all your everything. That gets complicated. Then you have to run the math on each particular plant and see how much you really want to eat and how much space it's going to take up. And it's going to vary by person, so I can't really do that here with you. But what I can say is that some of those plants are going to deliver more produce than others. Like your tomato plants, you know, a couple plants can give you all the tomatoes that you would really love. You could grow like 6 tomato plants and it would really give you everything you need for the year potentially, depending on how many tomatoes you eat, of course, and how much salsa you want to create for the winter and how much tomatoes you want to can for winter pasta sauce, etc. So you can start to calculate this all up. What I would say to you is go back to the beginning of this video where I talk about what does playing piano have to do with gardening. Pick the basics your first year. Pick the basics your first year. Grow those first. Learn the basics. Pick a couple plants and master them. So you want to master tomatoes and greens and herbs. That's a beautiful garden your first year. If you want to master, let's say you really want to master a particular plant and everybody's telling you not to. For instance, I tell everybody that I know, do not grow corn. Do not grow corn. It takes up a lot of space. You got to grow really like 100 square feet of corn to get decent heads of corn. It's just not worth it. And for a beginner, it takes all season. What if you pick up your whole season growing corn and then it's not successful? You'd feel like the whole season was a waste of time. Whereas if you had been growing greens and herbs, you could have been harvesting all season long and enjoying it. So in my opinion, if it was my first year and I was learning the basics, I would be learning every green. There's so many greens. There's mustard greens, there's lettuces, there's arugula, there's celery, there's sorrel, there's kale, there's collard, there's chard, there's so many varieties of Japanese mustards that there are too many to count. Misuna, Kamatsuna, bok choy. There's just so many there to play with. Giant red mustard is one of my favorites. So many good mustard greens. Play around with greens. Play around. There's sweet greens. There's bitter greens. There's tart greens. Play around with all the greens and all the herbs. And those are the basics. They're going to help you get started and feel successful. And yeah, I would throw in maybe a couple of fruiting plants. I'll tell you, tomatoes, while they're delicious, they don't feel bad if you get a disease the first year. They are susceptible to about 9 diseases, but that's okay. You're still going to get tomatoes even if they get a disease. So that makes, in my book, that makes tomatoes still worthwhile your first year. And then from there, then I would start adding some other plants. All right. So what I would love for you is a garden that you love and a garden that keeps you nourished. And I believe that a garden that keeps you nourished is one that helps you grow, and it's one that you're harvesting food from. And so if you cut to the end game too fast and you decide that you want to grow everything, like the most experienced gardener down the street that you saw their garden and wow, that looks amazing, and I want to do it everything like they did my first year, be ready for some things not to work out. And that's okay. If you're that person who just dives straight in and does everything, that's okay. Just know that not everything's going to work out. Journal, see what does. Make sure you grow lots of greens so that you do feel the fulfillment of all those greens and the beautiful harvest of all those greens. All right, so that is it for Harvest Community TV. This is episode 10. This is our final episode, y'all. I wanted to do this special just because I know there's so many beginner growers out there. Let us know in the comment section what you thought of the series and what you still want to know. One more thing is that last week we hosted the Superfood Garden Summit. And right now, if you go sign up for the Superfood Garden Summit, my presentation on plant biology, which basically shows you from seed all the way around to seed what to expect from the plant life cycle, you can still go and grab that today. So when you go to superfoodgardensummit.com and you register, you'll see that video once you register. And it's a really, really fun video that shows you what to expect as your plants go through 5 stages of growth, what's normal, what's not. And I also share 5 weird and wonderful things that plants do. So go check that out, superfoodgardensummit.com. And please post in the comments below. Let us know what you thought of the series and what you're still looking to learn. All right. Take care, you guys. Love you. Mwah.